everyone. I hope everyone had an excellent week. This week I found out that my office chair just broke. Yeah. Um, so now my husband got me a new one because I spend too much time in here to not do that. Um, so this week was a interesting little beast. Everything from did you know that the Robodebt Royal Commission is still going? Now, if you're not aware, I've uploaded some of the highlights. And if you're not following me on Twitter or Facebook, do make an opportunity to do just that. Now, here's the reason why that part's going to be monumentally important to what happens next. Because I think that what happened with Robodebt would be revitalized if we ignored the findings of this Royal Commission, keeping in mind that 2,000 lives at minimum were lost to this awful endeavour which the government took place in, the LNP government. With Scott Morrison being the main architect of such an appalling policy of averaging. Okay, we're going to talk about that tonight. We're going to talk about banking and a good note from that. We're going to talk about the upcoming election in New South Wales. There's an issue with the WA. There is a really, really good one about Tucker Carlson wanting to take another country. Yeah, this guy that so reckons he loves democracy so much that he'd like to take another country. More on that later. And an asylum seeker issue, how children are being openly stolen in refugee areas. So all that and more, so strap in and enjoy the show. So first up, we are going to touch the Robodebt saga. Now, the reason I call it a saga is because it's such a long and interesting overlook into what happened here. That's not to say that the whole thing hasn't been devastating to hear, because of course it's been an emotional roller coaster to hear at certain points that lives were lost due to this saga. So keep that in mind as you're listening to some very graphic details. These aren't normal things that you would normally hear in these sorts of settings. Normally you hear of something awful taking place in a Royal Commission, but this was a little bit painful. And then it's downright malicious, if you ask me. The intent was malicious because they had advice and they knew that the advice was that it probably wasn't legal, and then they knew that averaging was not a good way to determine deaths. Worse than that, not only did they do that, but they knew that this was impacting people who did not have the means to fight a literal government. So, of course, the effects of this was going to be big. So let's jump right into our first part of the RC. When you hear this, do not be surprised that it's not great. The disturbing nature behind this is they're asking the same questions a range of different ways. Now, investigators normally do this. So if you go into a police interrogation room, one, I would advise that you don't say anything, because they will ask the same question many different ways. But in this kind of setting, you kind of can't. If you don't say anything about what the facts were around something like this as a paid employee, it doesn't look real good. So as the questions were ranging, I thought, oh, this is going to get really good really quickly. but as we were going through it, they were using language that was like skirting around it, which is why you had to be very careful and diligent to hear how they were responding and how the questions were being asked several times. So take a listen to this and tell me what you think. Well,
There was nothing about full information. It was about averaged income and nothing else. There was nothing about full information in it. Well, we can go to it if you like.
I think that's the 2014 advice describes the process of basically it sets out the rate calculator step within the legislation. I think that's what that's trying to say.
Well, what's the full information?
The full information would be information on the person's income over the various periods.
But the advice was in response to a request to advise whether averaged ATO income could be the basis for raising a debt.
Yeah.
And it responded to that. So they were just talking about averaged ATO income. That's hardly full information, surely.
So sorry, this sentence, I think that the sentence is saying that the advice received in 2014 talks about the process of rate calculation under the Social Security law. Mm-hmm. Sorry, I'm just reading it out now.
2014 advice actually talks about what the Act requires. That's a significant difference. It's true.
Yes, and it describes the method of generating an accurate debt on that basis.
Now, that's a very interesting wording when they talk about establishing an accurate debt. Now, when that comes up, and you've got to really hear the wording and needle into exactly what they're saying. They're saying, no, hold on. You're telling me that you were still going by averaging, even though you were more supposed to go by an accurate amount. Nowhere in the legislation did it just say that you could just assume what someone's debt was. So this shows culpability right there. So let's move forward.
On the basis of full information. So are you saying that the advice actually considers the Act and that's full information, and the 2017 one doesn't bother to consider it, so it's just skipped that vital point? Surely
I think
not.
The use of full information in the context of that sentence is referring to all of the income information about the person over the fortnightly periods.
Okay, so you're asserting that the 2014 advice was based on the position where full information about the person's income over the fortnight was available.
No.
See, now that's where it gets super interesting. It goes on to this. See, when he starts realizing that she was saying, oh, you mean that the averaging was supposed to take into place the full amount. And then he's like, no. So take a listen.
That sentence is saying that the 2014 advice relates specifically to the calculation of debt when full information is available. And so the 2014 advice later comes to the conclusion that income averaging is not in line with the legislation.
The 2014 advice, I said to you already, was based on...
See, now she's frustrated that she's had to go back and then explain the very simple method of that's not what the legislation said. And you can just see the frustration in her face. Like, why didn't you just front up to it? Now we have to go back over that question again. It's frustrating.
Instructions which asked what the position was as to averaging on the ATO data.
Yes.
So it was directed to that question and it said that that was not permissible. Yes. It wasn't directed to the question of if you have full information about the person's income, is it okay? It didn't
That's
consider.
right. Yeah. Sorry, I might be misunderstanding.
Well, I don't understand you. I don't understand how you could refer to the 2014 advice as being concerned with the position where there was full information.
I mean, it indicates the method of generating an accurate debt amount on the basis of full information. I think it's just setting out the steps of calculating the debt.
That there is an admission and you just got it. Whether you realise that you just got that admission is up to you to make that determination. What he's now copying the brunt of and the full awareness was that no, averaging was not supposed to be part of it. That's an interesting admission.
It refers to the steps of calculating a debt in order to point out that averaging isn't consistent with it.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. All right. Is there anything else you want to say about it? Because what you say in that email makes no sense to me at all about 2014 advice being based on full information. So, but we may have explored it to the max. So here's your chance if you've got any better explanation.
Commissioner, perhaps the witness might be given an opportunity to read it in full again. He hasn't received or been given these documents before giving his evidence today.
This is the email again, or
1372.
So they're like, no, that didn't go as planned. So let's just say that he wasn't prepared. That's not entirely true. These people were given ample opportunity to secure any and all details of communication and so forth in relation to the Robodebt saga. So to then say, hey, I don't think that they were fully prepared for this is disingenuous at best.
Yes, as I understand this document is.
certainly.
That's
Okay, then it goes on to this part.
sorry, I'm confused about what's happening right now.
All right.
So
I
now
had
she's
asked you
presenting the facts.
why you in that email drew a distinction between the 2014 advice and the 2017 advice, in that the latter related to the situation where there was, the 2014 advice related to the situation where there was full information. I asked you why you said the 2014 advice related to the situation where there was full information when it was about averaging based on ATO data as to income.
Now, once again, she's arriving at the part where she is correcting the record. And then having it on full display so we can see the legislation, see that averaging was not part of it, and then understand exactly what's wrong with it. That's where we're at.
I think that sentence is just describing the 2014 advice, which includes a description of the method of calculating the debt based on full information.
I don't know if you want to pursue this, but
Mr.
It's up
Herman,
to you,
surely
Mr.
you
Gregory.
understood the 2014 advice dealt with the question of whether it was lawful to calculate a debt based on average income rather than actual earned income in any given fortnight.
Yes.
In other words, it was saying, no, idiots, you can't average it. Because nowhere in the legislation did it say you could.
Yes.
Yes. That was the question to which the 2014 advice was directed.
Yes.
And you're referring here to the basis of full information.
Yes.
Full information is not averaged income. It is actual information about earned income, isn't it?
That's right.
Yes.
That's right. And
So your statement that the 2014 advice relates to the process of rate calculation under the Social Security law and indicates the method of generating an accurate debt amount on the basis of full information,
yes.
which could not be averaged income.
No.
Right. That is, it is something less than full information.
So we get him there. After several times of saying, hey, averaging is not part of that legislation. What were you doing? He finally comes to have that moment of, oh yeah, no, I have to tell him that was never the plan. You know, it wasn't supposed to be part of the plan. So whose plan was it and why did it exist?
Yes.
And you're attributing the concept of full information to the 2014 advice in contrast to less than full information in respect of the 2017 advice.
Sorry, could you say that one again?
Yeah, that looks bad. Look, watch this. This is the last one on this one, and then I have more. This one always does take me a bit to go through because the Robodebt saga has been one of the most contentious issues that is I have not seen this in the news. I mean, if you have, go for gold. But I haven't seen it largely discussed. Why? Because that would mean that Scott Morrison had culpability. But what I did see was Rupert Murdoch going, no, we haven't seen revision of the welfare system ever in our time since the LNP was in. This is the revision that they're referring to, of course. See, it kind of smears them both. And now both got shit on their hands and they don't want to deal with it. That's where we are. Yep. So take a look and see what you think.
We're attributing the concept of full information to the 2014 advice in contrast to less than full information in the 2017 advice. In this paragraph.
In the paragraph, I think what I was attempting to do, and I may not be explaining this very well, in coming to its conclusion, the 2014 advice describes how the rate of payment and debt is calculated, and that requires a fortnightly calculation based on full information.
As the lawful way to do it.
Yes.
And what you're saying is that the inconsistent 2017 advice permits a calculation on averaged income as a last resort, lawfully.
Yes.
That's what you're saying.
Yes.
Was that the reason why you didn't want to give the 2014 advice initially?
No, I can't recall, but based on the email that I've put in here, I considered it to be out of scope.
That is out of scope after Ms. Pulford had said she thought it was in scope. That is the author of both documents.
She provided the email and suggested that it should be included, yes.
That is, the author of both documents told you clearly that she considered both advices to be within scope.
I'm not sure if she was the author of the first document, but it certainly came from the same team that she worked in, yes.
It was second counselled by her.
Okay, yes.
Right.
So now that that's happened, we will see how that then progressed. So listen to this and then, okay, listen to the hiding of that situation. This is extraordinary to listen to.
Was plainly a reference to providing the 2014 advice in the background, that is, in a diminished position in respect of the 2017 advice.
That's not how I read that.
Well, why would it be necessary to give the Ombudsman the 2017 advice again? They weren't asking for it, were they?
I'm not sure. We had it ready.
Well, you agree they weren't asking for it?
I agree they weren't asking for it, that's right.
So why would you give it again and reference the 2014 advice in the background?
I think providing full information on the two pieces of advice.
Full information? Why didn't you conduct an investigation then into what Ms. Halbert said was in writing?
I'm not sure.
I suggest to you that what you were doing was again attempting to portray to the Ombudsman that DSS had satisfied itself of the legality of the scheme despite the 2014 advice.
Yes, I think we had satisfied ourselves at that time.
Right. But given that the Ombudsman wasn't asking for your level of satisfaction or not, and was asking for the advice, no doubt so it could make up its own mind, why didn't you just give all of the documents and the 2014 advice without the DSS spin?
To provide the full context.
Except that you didn't provide the full context, did you?
What do you mean?
We've gone through how the Ombudsman specifically asked you for all documents related to the need for legislative advice, and you've said that you didn't bother to get it.
Yep.
So there's an admission, a really, really clear admission that they did not have the advice to do what they did. Averaging was never supposed to be part of it. And it was a really interesting way of doing it. And I thought by this point that we would have been like, hey, why do we have to ask you this same question different times? So they really should be charged with misleading the people. This RC is costing a lot of money. So let's be abundantly clear about why I'm pointing that out. Because these people were also paid a lot of money. And they were paid a lot of money and knew better. They knew it was cruel and they knew what the outside outcome would be. They knew that the low socioeconomic would be affected, and they knew that the whole idea of averaging was garbage. So why do you think that they ignored the advice from the 2014 memo and ultimate statement of both documents? Because if you followed it, rubber debt never would have gotten in place. So this thing that Rupert Murdoch was hyping up with the LNP, of this amazing legislation of making this happen, blew up spectacularly in their faces, as it should have. But it also costed over 2,000 lives that we know of. There may be more. The really disappointing part about this is that we're led to believe that this is like the normal thing. Like we're supposed to go, oh, well, you know, this is happening and that's happening and this is all normal. You know, like these admissions now are somehow to make up for that. But they can't even get to that point. They've got to have it drug out of them, like to an excruciating level. Next, I want to discuss The Voice. Now, there is going to be a lot about this coming up. So let's have a look at Anthony Albanese talking about The Voice and how it's an opportunity to unite the country. So here we go. What The Voice is and what he plans it to do.
Well, it's about two things and two things only. The first thing is recognition, to recognise in our nation's birth certificate, our constitution, the fact that we live with the oldest continuous culture on earth. That should be a source of great pride. And secondly, it's that Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people should be consulted on matters that affect them through The Voice. That is all that is before the Australian people, those important principles. And I must say it is fantastic that every Premier and Chief Minister are all united in our support for this going forward. It will be a unifying moment for the nation.
We need to come together as one nation and be unified. We support as a government The Voice, and you know, I've also gone on my own journey, and it was last year, following the Australia Day service, that we put the Aboriginal flag on the Harbour Bridge. Now, that is not something to divide, that is something to unite our great country, and I think that's exactly what it's done.
Well, it's about two things.
See, now what that does, hold on. What that essentially does is that this means that Dominic Perrott knows that he's about to engage in a really brutal election. Now, we're going to be talking about him later on in this segment. But I can assure you, Dominic is running a little bit scared. And he knows Chris Minns is running a stellar campaign. He also knows that Chris Minns is getting a lot of support from Albo. Dutton just isn't rocking up to the show. I mean, what do you want me to say? That he's going to rock up with bells on and Peter Dutton's going to use his 20% swing with the country to the 20% support that he has right now to woo people? No. Dutton is a monster. There's no way they're going to keep him as opposition leader. But sure, whatever gets them to finish at the end of the night, who knows? It's a little bit crude, but that's where we're at. So, with that, here's Albo again having that same conversation. Okay, so Channel 9 tries to have a conversation with Albo, but here's where they really, really messed it up. They were like, no, we really do want to hear from you, but in each and every moment that he tries to answer, they interrupt. Enjoy the rage, people.
Indigenous, the community, trying to get some consensus between you and the opposition. Why won't you sit down and discuss this so that there is more clarity out there for the public, so that we can actually achieve the outcomes that you're after?
I've had 5 meetings with Peter Dutton, Sarah, 5 meetings. And last July, I put forward the actual questions that will be asked in the referendum. Let's be clear. A constitution doesn't go through all of the detail of our defence program. It says Australia will have a defence force. It doesn't go through all the detail of our tax system. It says it gives power.
No, but people are still confused, though, PM. That's the problem. You don't need all the detail, but you need a bit more detail so it's easier to digest. I mean, is it even necessary? You know, you've got Indigenous...
See what they did there? And when he finally says, no, we've done 5 meetings with Mr. Dutton. We've given him what's going to be on those questions that he's asked about enriching the voice to Parliament. We've also given him an opportunity to discuss with us everything that we have so far. Like if you're doing other parts of legislation. You don't hand over your whole cookie. You just say, this is what we're proposing. There. You either vote on it or you don't. And I mean, we know that the LNP is going to try and sneak something in there, which they always do. So no one knows what the final thing will look like. This now will be up to the voting block of how that takes place. But amending the Constitution, let me get that part out there. If anyone is telling you to vote no, they're deliberately misleading you about what is actually going to take place. It's just a voice that makes sure more of Australians, the First Nations people, their voice is heard. It's as simple as that. If anyone else is writing you and saying it's going to be a third chamber or anything else, they've pissed in your pocket and told you it's water. That's basically where I'm at. And I'm telling you now, if you're here to troll it and say, you know, go on about why it needs so much detail, what are you really afraid of the First Nations people are going to do? What? You're literally afraid that they're going to have an actual voice. Is that a little bit frightening for you? Why would that be frightening? Why would that be alarming? The people we abused and treated horribly since we got here. Why would that be frightening to you if they got a voice? See, that's what annoys me about this debate, is that they're pretending with some semblance of, oh, this can't be good. You mean that the people that we abused over all this time might actually say something like we did something wrong? And continue to do so in Aboriginal communities. I mean, hell, if we don't like our self-reflection, maybe we should try what we're putting out there. It's nothing but racist idiocy for anyone to absolutely object to this. If you're saying no for any reason, you're a racist. It's that simple. I'm not going to sugarcoat you and wrap you up in a little tiny blanket and make you feel good about a really appalling set of behaviours. If you come here and then go, I just don't think we should, you're basically saying I'm a racist and I need you to know that. That's exactly where we're at. So I'm not going to play nice. And any right-winger Aboriginal like Warren Mundine that's telling you something else or Jacinta Price, remember, they're being bought to sell you a story. That's where we're at. This all or nothing scenario isn't real. I don't know why it needs to be in the Constitution that our First Nations people should be recognised. It's a little weird. But we've constructed this very racist system, so let's march it down the road and pretend like we're not, doing this because we're consoling the racists of the nation on how much they need to be held and pitied amongst their whining about what they think is going to happen. Look, just like the same-sex marriage debate, if you're here to make an issue about what you think this is and not just say, makes sense to me, I'm not going to be able to help you. There is no helping you. You have to have that moment for yourself. It doesn't just arrive. Because only a person of the most appalling nature would think that the voice was anything more than just enriching the nation. I have spent a lot of time on Twitter, and Twitter is now the cesspool of my life. I won't go into how graphic it's been, but needless to say, the abuse is rife. And you have people at me about what they think the voice is going to be. They're so intimidated by the First Nations people actually getting a voice. I'm not going to baby him. I don't mollycoddle him. I don't give him a blankie and tell him it's all going to be fine. I just go, no, basically, if you have any objections to someone getting a voice, particularly the First Nations people, if you get a problem with that, there's a problem with you. If you're trying to hide away from what this means for our nation and actually acknowledge that we haven't treated our First Nations people great back then and still today, the problem isn't with me. The very fact that it's put down there as a yes and no and we're mollycoddling these racist idiots is so frustrating. Now, if you're more than welcome to go on Twitter and experience the cesspool that Elon Musk wants it to be. He is very quickly making it into the most appalling platform I've ever seen. And it's littered with disinformation about what things actually mean. Because fact checkers don't exist anymore. He's fired the staff that actually would check this kind of stuff. So a lot of these racists now have carte blanche to just say it. So I'm no longer wrapping my words up into pretty little niceties. If there is someone that is still saying to me, hey, I think we should have so much of the more detail into what's going to happen with the voice, I've basically told them, what are you scared of? You're scared of listening to people? That's weird. It is what it is. But we have to come together as a nation. And we can't do that while we're mollycoddling these idiots that are trying to be the No campaign. And they're idiots. There's no dressing it up in pretty little niceties and then saying, oh, but we should say nice things. No. And I was the same way with the same-sex marriage debate. The only reason that you're opposed to it is because you just hate people. And I'm not going to help you get there. I'm not going to hold your hand and tell you that, oh, no, you're still a good person. No, that's not it at all. You're a terrible human. Learn to live with that scape and do something about it. I'm not going to hold your hand and tell you that you're a great person, but this one issue. No. If you're awful about this, you're awful about most things because you lack no insight into what is actually going on. You lack the intellectual curiosity to really look at something of all objectives and go, okay. Because it is not, in my humble opinion, for me to tell what is happening in another part of the country, which I personally have never been to. I personally haven't experienced. And I'm not part of that culture. How dare I tell them what their voice should be? And if you're intimidated by it, I'm not going to hold your hand. Okay, moving to the next part. So, Linda Reynolds, she's set to sue Brittany Higgins. Now, if you remember, Brittany Higgins was allegedly raped by Bruce Lehman. Now, if you remember, Linda Reynolds went through a lot of effort to call the victim, Brittany, a lying cow. She later goes on to apologize to Brittany. But now thinks that the dust has settled enough after sitting in the courtroom and intimidating her and getting her partner to do the same. She now thinks the dust has settled enough, just enough to go, oh, can I sue her now? What do you exactly plan to get? Yeah, it looks a little bit awful. But let's have a look at what she plans to do. Okay. Linda Reynolds sends formal defamation complaint to Brittany Higgins' partner, David Shiraz. Yeah. Because you're that awful of a human being in your existence, and that you've made a lot of money off just being an awful human being. Why not just go for the whole hog? Why not? While we're here. Liberal Senator Linda Reynolds has set a formal defamation complaint to David Shiraz, the partner of the former government staffer, Brittany Higgins. Over Twitter, lawyer claim it caused damage that cannot be underestimated. Maybe I would assume that if someone has a bad opinion of Miss Reynolds, maybe it was earned. Did she ever think that? Or does she just think calling victims lying cow part of the norm? Lawyers for the Reynolds have threatened to take the case to Western Australia Supreme Court as they pursue an apology and damages from the journalist, claiming he made inaccurate, professionally damaging criticisms of her online. Two things. Miss Reynolds is a public figure. That's one. And two, which means that her chances of this being some sort of that you can't have an opinion based upon her character, incorrect. Otherwise, Rupert Murdoch would lose a lot of frickin' money. Two is that I don't think that Miss Higgins should be dragged through any more of this, and that's what the intent is here. Reynolds was a cabinet minister and Miss Higgins' boss at the time. The staffer claimed that she was raped by colleague Bruce Lehman on a couch outside the minister's Parliament House office in 2019. Now, do keep in mind, subsequent of this court appearance, other victims have come forward. And as always, I stand with Brittany. Okay. Lehman was charged and the trial was aborted last June due to a juror misconduct. Prosecutors later dropped charges against Lehman, saying a retrial would pose an unacceptable risk to Ms. Higgins' health. Oh, also keep in mind that it was Linda Reynolds' team which leaked the declining mental health of Brittany Higgins, which also is illegal, and they never should have been handed those details. Lawyers for Reynolds from Perth firm Bennett sent concerns notice January 6 to Shiraz, who lives in Queensland, under Western Australia's Defamation Act. It raises concerns about two tweets published in Shiraz's Twitter account in January and December of 2022, In a reference to Reynolds, the senator's lawyers claim that the tweets carried defamatory imputations that the senator bullied and continued to bully Higgins. You mean he pointed out that you were a horrible, horrible human, and now you want compensation for that being pointed out? Gotcha. And that she leaked privileged material regarding the compensation claims settled between Higgins and the federal government. Oh, she also did that. Her lawyers state that those imputations are false without basis and constitute a serious defamation of my client. The damage this has caused and continues to cause my client cannot be underestimated. The notice reads, now do keep in mind that several Liberal MPs have attempted this. I'm going to sue you, later back out, realising that they have no case. One of them most notoriously was Christian Porter. So keeping that in mind, that's where you need to be. It also notes that Shiraz's tweets were reported by several media outlets. The notice seeks an apology and a retraction of tweets and payment of Reynolds' legal costs and an appropriate sum of compensation. One would assume she ain't going to get crap. But sure, fire your lawyers. I hope that the taxpayer isn't paying for this shit show. Oh, righty. From July 1, 2022, the maximum awarded damages of a non-economic loss arising from a defamatory publication is $443,000, the notice reads. Keeping in mind that Miss Reynolds and her partner, Miss Higgins and her partner, David Traz, probably don't have that kind of money. But considering that she lived off the taxpayer, of course she didn't lose any money. So, yeah. It notes that Reynolds reserves a right to commence defamation proceeding in the Supreme Court and threatens with an application for an injunction to prevent Shiraz publishing further tweets about her. Court documents shows Reynolds has complained about tweets on the 27th of January 2022 and December 4th, 2022. Reynolds is seeking damages, including aggravated damages, in an injunction restraining Shiraz from publishing further material, or words substantially similar to thereto, documents show. In other words, stop talking about me and I'm threatening you. So that's what this is basically. That's what she's afraid of. People are still talking about what she did. She claimed the interest on damages in the rate of 6% from the date of the publication to the judgment. Because why not? You're all out at this point. Dude, when you're shit showing, why not just go the whole 9 yards? And that's exactly how they behave. Shiraz is understood to be represented by Leon Ziwa of Sydney firm Arnold Block and Liebler. Now, one would have to assume that that might have something to do with a firm that Christian Porter recently started. I'd be interested to know if he is taking her on. Shiraz and Reynolds were contacted for comment. An Arnold Block Liebler spokesman declined to comment. It is understood that Shiraz does not plan to settle the case. In other words, he's realised you're an idiot and you're going to lose. That's basically what he's saying. But we will see how that one plays out because he knows that the LNP make a lot of false claims. And they should be, at this point, considered vexatious litigants at this sort of stuff. Reynolds, who gave evidence during Lehman's trial, was accused of attempting to coach defence lawyers during the cross-examination of Higgins and inappropriately seeking to obtain transcripts of evidence. In 2021, Reynolds apologised to Brittany for calling her a lying cow in comments made privately but subsequently publicly reported, and agreed to pay legal costs and make a donation to a sexual assault charity, a part of the confidential settlement. One would hope that she did make that payment to a charity. And she did make a public apology, and I would say that she's a bit butthurt for that. So I don't see how she can sue over being called out, but the things that she got called out for, she apologised for. See what I mean by it's a losing case? But sure, give it a go. Whatever floats your boat, Miss Reynolds, we will see where you land. Okay. So Next, we are going to talk about banking. Recently, a whistleblower into the banking sector revealed some awful truths. Now, as a result, he was awarded an Order of Australia medal. So, let me show you exactly what happened. Okay. Audio Bank whistleblower Jeff Morris awarded Order of Australia. Now listen to this.
Well, the man who lifted the lid on poor practices within one of Australia's big four banks has been awarded a member of the Order of Australia. More than a decade ago, Jeff Morris was an employee of the Commonwealth Bank when he blew the whistle on widespread malpractice within the bank's financial services sector. Those revelations and following claims that the financial regulator knew but didn't act prompted a Senate inquiry and a subsequent landmark Royal Commission. It was, though, a challenging time for Jeff Morris, who joins us now. Jeff, good afternoon to you.
G'day, Glenn.
You made a pretty big personal sacrifice more than a decade ago. Did you feel like you had much choice?
No, well, I guess I always say that it wasn't a choice. It was just something that I had to do. And I simply wouldn't have been able to live with myself if I hadn't done it. I knew it. I knew there was going to be a heavy price to be paid, but it really wasn't a matter of weighing that up. It was just what I saw was so bad, and the suffering on the part of the victims that I saw was so bad that there was nothing else I could have done.
What sort of personal price did you end up paying?
Well, it's interesting. I talked to a lot of potential whistleblowers today, and I explained to them that by the time it's over, they'll be blacklisted in their chosen industry. They'll never work again in their chosen field. If they have a family, they will probably lose their family. The stress of the whole ordeal will break them up, and more than likely they'll be diagnosed with PTSD as well before it's over, because
So this is the ultimate sacrifice that he made. Now, subsequent of this, this is why we need better protection for whistleblowers.
the physical and mental health will suffer. What happens when you take an organisation on is that it closes ranks, and particularly modern organisations are very powerful, massive financial resources, access to media, politicians and so forth, and they'll do their best to destroy you in order to remove your credibility so that your allegation has no impact on them. So it's unfortunately, it's just a path that I see every organisation that comes under threat responding in this way, and I'm currently seeing other whistleblowers being exposed to exactly what I went through.
That said, what was the tipping point for you? What made you act?
Oh, it was the day I had an elderly couple in my office physically breaking down about I think it was $700,000 of their money had been vaporised. And I saw the managers at the bank were trying to cover it up and were stonewalling these people. And they had a perfect right to file a complaint. They were trying to discourage them from even filing a complaint. And I knew there were a lot of these people, and I knew they were all being fobbed off, and that the bank would attempt to deny them the compensation they're entitled to. And I realised that even with lawyers acting for them, unless somebody on the inside helped them, they would have had no chance.
The Royal Commission that followed uncovered much more horror stories. How did you feel as you watched those hearings unfold?
Well, I did watch them. In fact, I was there for some of them, and in many ways, the Royal Commission itself was, for me anyway, a bit of an anticlimax. It was only a light go over. It was one Royal Commissioner for 1 year.
That's because Scott Morrison did it. If someone with integrity did it from the ALP, the outcome would have been different. But here we are.
The Child Abuse Royal Commission had at least 5 commissioners and went for 5 years. So there was 25 times the manpower on the Child Abuse Royal Commission. The banks themselves instituted the calling of that Royal Commission. But the funny thing is that under-resourced as it was, it couldn't help as it scratched the surface, uncovering just how bad things were. And I think the thing that stuck in a lot of people's imagination was charging fees to dead people. But I was there when the chairman of CBA was put in the witness box and questioned, and the material that was presented, it showed what I had known for a long time, that the board of CBA was basically asleep at the wheel. And I think this is probably true of most public company boards. The management was allowed to run amok because the board weren't doing their job. And I think the reason why the whole system failed was because...
So that's basically an admittance that oversighting boards are supposed to take a hands-on role into what happens next. What happens when that fails? That's what this Royal Commission exposed on a whole.
The regulator wasn't doing their job, and that was ASIC. And that was the main thing that prompted me to go public, was the knowledge that ASIC was failing. And they had a mandate for consumer protection that they did absolutely nothing about. They were failing people. They were not regulating the industry. So all the company boards and all the executives, they knew that the regulator was nothing to fear. And it's the old story, when the cat's away, the mice will play.
How confident are you that the system of regulation in the financial sector is any better now?
The system of regulation, I think, is actually no better. ASIC was let off yet again with promises that it would do better in future, which is what it always says. It gets, every time they have a Senate inquiry or hearing into ASIC, they get pilloried for their incompetence, and they grovel and apologise and say they'll do better next time, and they never do. And that happened in spades at the Royal Commission. They were absolutely exposed as a completely toothless regulator that didn't go to court, because they were so hopeless when they did go to court, they would normally lose. And to be honest, I don't think that's really changed, because the same people that were warming chairs in ASIC in 2008, when I first went to them, who did nothing, a lot of those same people are still warming chairs at ASIC today. So in reality, I think the regulation of the industry hasn't improved at all. I think the industry itself has probably responded more. The people running the banks, I think, indeed, I had an acknowledgement at the end from the chairman and the CEO of CBA. They both apologised to me, and I think that was a sign that they accepted.
Keep in mind that Richard Boyle is also lifting the lid on the tax office. So that's also the two, if you will, train tracks running at a same parallel sort of thing. So we have the tax office that was attacking poor people too. And it was just blindly stealing from people and intimidating people. And Richard Boyle exposed that. Now we have the banks. See, now it looks very predatory when you think of it like that. And then you have robo-debt. So it all looks very predatory on the poor when you'll have an overlook like that.
That yes, they had lost their way. And I think the other banks are the same.
I'm not sure if this is the first time a whistleblower has been recognised with a member of the Order of Australia, Jeff Morris. What do you think about that recognition, and what it might mean for other current whistleblowers who might be feeling the weight of their actions?
Well, for me, that's the main thing. I think it is important in terms of encouraging the guys that are going through what I went through. So in that sense, I think it's very hopeful for all whistleblowers that finally there might be some acknowledgement. But at the same time, it's a bizarre situation as I sit here today. There's a very fine man called David McBride who blew the whistle on Australian war crimes in Afghanistan. But more than that, blew the whistle on the failures of the Australian Defence Force chain of command. And yet I still see the Defence Force closing ranks and trying to cover up and protect the chain of command, even as they throw the low-level grunts that went out on patrol. They're happy to throw them to the wolves with war crimes trials, but the hierarchy will be protected at all costs. And that's very similar to what happened in the banking industry. The low-level financial planners were thrown to the wolves, but the management who enabled and encouraged that behaviour were protected.
Real quick, Jeff Morris, would you do it all again if you had the chance?
Yes, I would, because as I said, it wasn't a choice, just something you have to do.
Jeff, good to talk again. Thanks very much and congratulations. Jeff Morris, now a member of the Order of Australia, for that whistleblower activity you heard described.
So that's part of where we're at. So you're hearing about institutionalised abuses that take place, like with robo-debt and the tax office and banking. So we're at a point where we can ultimately say, let's put the puzzle together, right? That abuse has never gone on unfettered so much. Before there would have been like, this would have made headline after headline after headline, but we're now not hearing it so much because we have a media outlet that's so pro doing this that you're not going to hear about it. Okay, so next we're going to talk about Jacinta Ardern and how she was threatened. Recently at a cafe, Jacinta Ardern with her daughter and a friend was threatened. Jacinta Ardern and her preschool daughter went to a cafe with a friend. Then two people walked in and started screaming at Jacinta and Neve, telling them how they intended to hurt and kill Neve and Jacinta. Yeah, it's not great. It's this is where we're at. So now we're at a point in the country where we're like, around the world, where we're like, we're gonna just not make this a big deal when it is absolutely a big deal. So we'll see how that one pans out. There should be charges for those people, and I hope justice does its job. Okay, next one is the New South Wales election. Okay, so here we go. New South Wales is about to come to an election between Dominic Perrott and Chris Minns. War of words erupts between OPS Dye School and the ABC. This school is one that Dominic Perrott went to, and it's quite apparent that they might have a real big racist issue. Okay, so let's have a look. New South Wales Powerful Education Authority is investigating Sydney school linked to Opus Dei amid a war of words between the ultra-conservative Catholic group and public broadcaster. See, when you're... The ABC Four Corners is planning to air a program Monday night titled Purity of an Education, alleging disturbing practices by the controversial organisation in several schools, exploring its influence in the New South Wales Liberals. All right. Premier Dominic Perrott attended Redfield College, one of the schools featured in the ABC expose, while Finance Minister Damien Tudhope also has linked to the school. Labor's Upper House MLC, Greg Donnelly, is described as an old dad of Redfield. Redfield, Turunga School for Girls, Wollomai College, Montgrove College are operated by parents for the Education Foundation paired. The schools are independent and not part of the Catholic Diocese. A letter sent to parents this week, co-signed by the principals of four schools, Paired Foundation claimed Monday's episode seems to be an attack on Catholic faith. No, it isn't. Exposing abuse is not attacking your faith. If you are in any way intimidated by a reality smacking you in the face, you're an idiot. You can't use religion to cover up all of your sins. You just can't. And you can't claim religious persecution because you're exposed for it. It doesn't work like that. You can attempt it on any which way that you want to, but this is how you operate. You're worried about your image rather than improving your work. It's disgusting. The claim has been rejected by the ABC, which said the episode reported by Louise Milligan investigated serious allegations that are clearly in the public's interest to be informed, including opposing consent, education, and encouraging students to make decisions contrary to medical advice. That's abusive practices. You're basically calling for rape. Now, you can pretty it up as some pretty little phrases that you want. But well, let's get down to the brass tacks. Okay. Encouraging students to make contrary to medical advice. Harm to students as a result of the education, homophobia, and recruitment of students under the guise of pastoral care. Yeah, I wondered how that turned out. Let's just go back to the Royal Commission into sex abuse. Underneath these same sorts of people, these same lot, these organisations have an appalling linkage to some appalling behaviour. Rather than trying to clean it up, they're worried about their image. How about you just clean it up? It's not difficult. You say, okay, we've got a problem. Let's put, things in place to make sure that we're not being homophobic or giving bad medical advice to people to harm students. How about not being pro-rape? That would be great, wouldn't it? That sort of stuff. Rather than doing that, you're like, no, you're attacking my religion. It's a weird position. And if you're threatened by it, sure. But this isn't some sort of persecution. This is facts. There is nothing in the program to attack on the Catholic faith. But if you don't like the outcome, how about you change what's being done there? It's purely about its affiliated educational institutions, and the timing of the story is not connected to the election. In fact, it is being broadcast out as far as the election as it could be. See, when you're pissing in your pants and you realise that you may have played a part in some of how your worldly views have been skewed from a very young age to be an awful human being, and then say the disgusting things on telly, and then go, why don't you like me? Well, seems pretty obvious, doesn't it? You're worried about your image so much. How don't you clean up the stuff that's going on? The Premier's office declined to comment. The episode where Milligan, who has a long history of covering Catholic churches, including the surrounding of Cardinal George Pell. Yeah. You know that he wasn't acquitted based on the merits. The facts remain the same. He did what he did. It was a technicality that got him off. And yes, that matters. That part's going to matter. He did it. He can be acquitted based on a technicality, but that does not absolve the crime. It's disgusting. Some cases that schools are not following state-run curriculum and accused of persistent attempts to recruit teenagers to opiate diet have taught misinformation about sexual health, including discouraging girls from getting the human papilloma cervical cancer vaccine. Yeah, because that's what we want. We want a resurgence of these sorts of issues. That's what I mean. If you want to be a religious organisation, have at it. But just don't tell people awful things that just aren't true. Just don't tell people what their medical advice should be. Daddy, you're not a doctor. You are not a doctor. What if you were? Let's play this game. You had an opportunity to be a doctor. That's not what you did with your life. You became an educator of young minds. And nowhere along the line did it say that you were a medical educator. No. So why the hell are you giving this advice? See, here's the deal. You want to go and tell people what to do medically with their bodies, a passes a board and does all of those things, have at it. But don't go and tell them things based upon a phony idea that in that book it tells you somehow about the cervical cancer vaccine. It's just wrong. Let's call a spade, and you got it wrong. Jeez. The spokesperson for the New South Wales Education Standard of Authority told the Herald Sun the agency was investigating schools after the allegations made by the ABC. Peg confirmed that NESA contacted the group to clarify we address concerns about the health and personal development curriculum. In other words, you did something stupid. So if you don't want to look bad, how about you clean it up? And don't make it about your phony religion outrage. Don't be an idiot. It's not difficult. I don't know why we're having this discussion. It's strange that we don't learn anything. We continue to make the same mistakes in these institutions. Pardon me. And accountability seems so low. The letter sent to parents from the principal's list and multiple questions as what they claim were put to the school, and the AB said that it was a foundation that it would never discourage students from following medical advice, but acknowledged it had changed how it addressed some issues, including the HPV vaccine. See, now, this is what I mean. People should not be playing doctor. You want to know about the vaccine of any kind, go and talk to your doctor. You want to talk to a school about educating young minds, and you want to have them involved in a church, have at it. But if they want to go and play around in fields that don't concern them, absolutely they should be raked over the coals for that. Oh my God, I can't believe I have to say that part out loud. It's weird for me too. And it's so disgusting that we're even having that discussion, and that they're so worried about their petty feelings. I don't care how they feel about advice like that. It's disgusting that we're even doing that. But here we are, you know. I don't know why we need to handle their emotions. What about the victims of what they did? Why is it that front and center? How about we never ever hear them say, oh, we're going to address that issue? No, you're going to go with religious persecution. And we let them say it like that's a thing. No, religious persecution is when you're just on your beliefs alone, you're being persecuted. Nowhere in the book does it say anything about the HPV vaccine or any other. So if you're going to claim that, you show me where in that book it even remotely touches on medical health of students. Yeah, when you look like an idiot, you got nowhere to run. Look stupid. Okay, next one. So I hear that a Labor candidate withdrew with the New South Wales election. Super close. Like, I think his name is still on all the things. New South Wales Labor candidate Khalil Asfour has withdrawn from the upcoming election after media reports detailing any expenses claimed that he had while overseas on the trip of Sydney Council, keeping in mind that ALP do not accept idiocy. So even before the election is out there, I'm looking at you, the LNP, with Catherine Deves. Hey, you kept her on that ballot, but then you're like, we're not going to invite her into any party room meetings. You knew who she was from the jump, but sure, keep her. And that's exactly what they did. As for the Canterbury Bankstown mayor, who was set to run for the upper house, said through a spokesman that he had been subject to a vicious smear campaign. That'd be rubbish because they got him for what he did. He vehemently denies any wrongdoing and has at all time adhered to policy. The expense claimed in a 2015 work trip to Japan, allegedly including alcohol, spa treatment that he said to treat cramping and experienced on the fly. Okay. It was apparently permissible under council rules. Crispin said that he made the right call to stand down and described the charges the ratepayers as unacceptable, flagging he wanted reform to the council allowances if elected in March. So even ALP is saying not acceptable, let's move on. That's what I mean. When Labor has one in their ranks that isn't great, they're like, great, we're getting rid of the crap. The LNP's like, oh, come here. We're very, very sorry we lied to you. But we're not going to kick out that person. We need the numbers. Cue the crazy train that they have amongst their list. It's insane what the right will accept and how many voters will accept that as their madness in safe blue ribbon seats. But if Labor has one, they're like, no, it's just got to go. And how quick Chris Minns was like, no, I actually think that this is, I don't care if it is within the lines of the rules. You knew it was wrong, and I'm glad that you stepped down rather than waited till after the election to have to cause the taxpayers to pay for a runoff of some kind, a rerun. See, that's the difference here. ALP have integrity about this kind of stuff. It frustrates me that we deal with a right-wing media outlet and the party itself that will accept any kind of shit show and then go, you know what? We're fine with it. We just won't accept Catherine Deves into the party room, but we'll take her vote. It's a little weird. I don't know how we got to this point. Recently, a Labor person went to One Nation along with Mark Latham. And we're like, you can have them. We don't want them. We never wanted to own them to begin with. If they're that close to awful, we don't want them as part of our 10. But the Liberal Party sees the defection and then they're like, oh no, we can play nice with them. We can play footsie underneath the table and it's awesome. I mean, have a look at when Cora Bernardi defected. They were like, well, we can still be friends, right? And we still hold all the same values. No. Cora Bernardi was openly humiliating the main Liberals. But it didn't matter now, did it? Same as Senator David Lionhelm. He did the same thing and made up his own party. And he openly mocked the Liberals. And the Liberals are like, no, we're just going to pander to him. We need the numbers. That's basically what happens with the Conservatives, where the lefts are like, no, you got to go. This is disgraceful. We don't want any ties to you. We're not going to play footsie with you underneath the chair. The integrity is so much better. This is why I'm a leftist, because they believe in something. There's integrity, and it's not always the standard I would prefer. They're not going to behave how I personally would, but that's the thing about being unique. Everyone has that, but at least they're somewhat on the side of, okay, we're not going to accept that, which is why when I seen that resignation of his, I was like, yeah, cool. This means it's a cleaner race leading up to the New South Wales election. Next one I want to talk about is also in a Labor state. I know it's running a little bit over today, but this one's important. This one's a big one. So the state of WA is having a big problem. WA emergency team call for Commonwealth to help find tiny, deadly radioactive capsules. Now, keep in mind that there are a vast amount of areas that this could be, and it can be somewhere the size of a 10-cent piece. Now, this will take a lot of money and a lot of work to find it, but if you don't, it can't be great. Okay, authorities have launched an investigation to determine how tiny but potentially lethal radioactive capsule got lost, and it was being transported from Western Australia Rio Tinto mine to Perth. Yeah, let's see how we're going to keep justifying big oil. Thanks, Rio Tinto. You could have just exposed everyone to a radioactive mess. An urgent search continues for the 8th by 6mm unit that is believed to have fallen from the back of a truck. on its 1,400-kilometre journey from Newman to a depot in Perth suburb of Malga. Did I say that right? Emergency services say that they were hampered in their efforts by lack of radiation detection equipment and called on the Commonwealth and other states, including units that can be fitted to the vehicle. Why don't we have this stuff? If we're going to be stupid enough to extract this stuff, we should have the equipment to determine when it goes belly up. The Department of Fire and Emergency Services has deployed teams with handled radiation detection devices and metal detectors along the 36 kilometres of busy freight route. Superintendent Darryl Ray said they were concentrating on populated areas north of Perth and strategic sites along the Great Northern Highway. The roadside hunt, what we're not doing is trying to find a tiny little device for eyesight. The tell reporters were using radiation detectors to locate the gamma rays. That sounds like one of them superhero things. We got a gamma ray. I didn't know that was a real thing until I read that. And I looked up what it was, and I was like, so it's not just a superhero thingy. Yeah, I sound like an idiot. I get it, and it's funny. Okay. But there are concerns that solid capsule may have already become lodged in another vehicle's tyre, potentially being hundreds of kilometres away from the search area. Because remember, these areas do have a lot of fly and fly out workers. Rio Tinto said it contracted an expert of radioactive material handler the package of the capsule and transport it safely to the depot, and was told that it was missing, and was not told that it was missing till Wednesday. Because why not? Damage control has to be fundamentally first, not public safety. So this is our second last story. This one, I think, is one of the most interesting ones, but from earlier when we were talking about Robodebt. But this is different. So did Tucker Carlson say something stupid here? Well, I would say yes. Listen to this and tell me if Tucker Carlson is anti-democracy. This is wild. I guarantee you this is the most wildest thing you've ever heard. I've listened to Tucker Carlson many, many times. This is new. This is like one of those moments where you're like, he didn't say it on his Fox network. Oh, no. Here's a whole separate podcast where he's like on YouTube where he's just shit talking. So listen to how crazy this sounds. In 39 seconds, you're going to hear about how he wants to take a whole damn country. Canada. Yeah, he wants to take Canada because he thinks he can. Oh.
Down by the authoritarian government of Canada. What struck you about that? I thought you were going to ask me whether Trudeau is Castro's son, or if you very much obviously is, and I'm completely in favor of a Bay of Pigs operation to liberate that country.
Now, if you missed that, he's in favor of a Bay of Pigs operation. It's an invasion, basically. They're like, no, we'll just take it for ourselves. Because Americans are just like that. You don't do something that they like and you just take it. Because Tucker,
country. I mean, why should we stand back and let our biggest trading partner, the country with which we share the longest border, and actually, I could just say a great country. I love Canada. I've always loved Canada because of its natural beauty. Why should we let it become Cuba? Like, why don't we liberate it? We're spending all this money.
Why don't we liberate it? At what point do we just go, no. They're definitely anti-democracy. They are definitely pissing in our pockets and telling us it's water. They're telling us that they're these great patriots, but you get to the bottom line, they're like, nah, we're just really awful people and we just want to take stuff that isn't ours.
Money to liberate Ukraine from the Russians. Why are we not sending an armed force north to liberate Canada from Trudeau? And I mean it. Well, I don't know. But you don't have to answer. Yeah, I don't know that I'm there yet.
Yeah. That's how he wants to handle it. Because that's what he thinks that you should do. This shows you everything that you need on Fox. They don't care. They just do it. They say whatever just filters out of their mouth. No thought process as to what victims would impact it or anything like that. Tucker just... Sorry. Tucker just wants to liberate Canada, and take it by force, like in a Bay of Pigs style. Because why not? Because they don't see anything wrong with all the other invasions that they did. Because they're American. You don't get, if they don't get what they want, they just take it. And then they install their own government so they can rip them off subsequently for many, many decades to come and then say, we got this sweetheart deal. We gave you democracy. And we'll protect you from there. Because that's how they act. All right. This is our final story of the evening. Asylum seekers are being stolen. Kidnapped. Child asylum seekers kidnapped from Home Office Hotel. Dozens of asylum seeker children. Am I sharing that? Yes. Have been kidnapped by gangs from a Brighton hotel run by the Home Office because, of course, Conservatives. Apparently being repeated across the South Coast. An observer investigation can reveal. A whistleblower who works for the Home Office contractor, MITI, a child protection sources described children being abducted off the street outside the hotel and bundled into cars. Children are literally being picked up outside the building, disappearing and not being found. They're being taken from the street by traffickers. It is also emerged that the Home Offices were warned repeatedly by police of vulnerable occupants of the hotel asylum seeking children who had recently arrived to the UK without parents or carers would be targeted by criminal networks. And of course, they're doing nothing about it and they think that that's fine, and that's where we are. And I mean, that basically sums up how Conservatives handle things. You don't have a problem. We all, it's not a problem until it affects us personally. But even if it affects us personally, we get to own the libs or the left. If you're in America, we get to own the libs. And that's how they do it. We get to own the left. So that's how they convince their poor people to stay in the position that they do, even though a huge fan base of theirs is, because they get to go, well, this might impact you, but we're going to gaslight you into thinking not only does that not impact you, but at least you're getting to own the left. That's how they do it. It's very, very shady, and it's easy to see through it. So that wraps up where we are tonight. I want to thank everyone for coming. Thank you for watching, and stay safe till next week. Have a great night. Bye.